I have a presentation that I'll go through, and then I'm happy to take questions at the end. And that's often the most interesting part of these meetings, so I'll hope to leave time for that. If you think about social equity and racial justice, our four-way test, if everybody in the world followed our four-way test, we wouldn't have to have this conversation, right? The basis of our four-way test really leads to, is it fair? Is it just? Is it going to build goodwill? Is it beneficial to all concerned? If everybody just followed that, we'd be fine. So in some ways, Rotary is a wonderful organization to work on this problem. If you look at social justice, social equity, diversity, equity, and inclusion are words that are thrown out a lot, and they're run together. So DEI is an acronym that's used a lot in the social equity space. So, diversity obviously deals with the traits and characteristics that make people unique. Sex, race, ethnicity, whatever it might be. There's a whole list, all different types of people in all different shapes and colors, right? Equity is an approach to making sure that everyone gets the support that they need so that we all have the same opportunities. And inclusion is making sure that everybody is made to feel welcome and included. And if you look at a couple examples of that, here's an example of equality versus equity. And equality is everybody getting the same leg up, but equity is everybody getting the leg up that they need. And this is another way of putting it. Accessibility is being able to get in the building. Diversity is getting invited to the table. Inclusion is having your voice heard at the table. And belonging, is your voice at the table, and belonging is having your voice heard at the table. And we like this one because it includes the accessibility angle. So the Social Equity Task Force deals with not just racial justice, but also people with disabilities as well. So what is systemic racism? That's a term that's thrown around a lot. And it's, when you talk about social equity, oftentimes the conversation comes back to systemic racism. So I'm going to play you a really short little video that talks about the background of systemic racism.
Jamal is a boy who lives in a poor neighborhood. He has a friend named Kevin, who lives in a wealthy neighborhood. All of Jamal's neighbors are African American, and all of Kevin's neighbors are white. Because Jamal's school district is mostly funded by property taxes, his school is not very well funded. His classrooms are overcrowded, his teachers are underpaid, and he doesn't have access to high-quality tutors or extracurricular activities. Kevin's school district is also funded by property taxes, so his school is very well funded. His classrooms are never crowded, his teachers are very well paid, and he has access to high-quality tutors and lots of extracurricular activities. Kevin and Jamal live only a few streets away from each other. So how come they're growing up in such different worlds with such different opportunities for success? The answer has to do with America's history of systemic racism. To understand it better, let's look at what life was like for Kevin and Jamal's grandparents. Decades after the Civil War, many government agencies started to draw maps dividing cities into sections that were either desirable or undesirable for investment. This practice was called redlining, and it usually blocked off entire black neighborhoods from access to private and public investment. Banks and insurance companies used these maps for decades to deny black people loans and other services based purely on race. Historically speaking, owning a home and getting a college education is the easiest way for an American family to build wealth. But when Jamal's grandparents wanted to buy a house, the banks refused because they lived in a neighborhood that was redlined. So Jamal's grandparents were not able to buy a home, and because colleges could prevent them from attending through legal segregation, their options for higher education were really scarce. Kevin's grandparents, on the other hand, got a low-interest loan to buy their first house and got accepted into a handful of top universities, which traditionally only accepted white students. This opened up a wealth of opportunities that they were able to pass on to their kids and grandkids. Even as late as the 1980s, an investigation into the Atlanta real estate market showed that banks were more willing to lend to low-income white families than to middle or upper-income African-American families. As a result, today, for every $100 of wealth held by a white family, Black families have $5.04. A 2017 study confirms that redlining is still affecting home values in major cities like Chicago today. This explains how Kevin and Jamal inherited vastly different circumstances. Unfortunately, the story doesn't end there. A big part of systemic racism is implicit bias. These are prejudices in society that people are not aware that they have. Let's go back to Kevin and Jamal. Against all odds, Jamal manages to be the only student from his high school to get accepted into a great university, the same one that Kevin and his high school friends are attending. But after Kevin and Jamal both graduate, Jamal notices that his resume isn't drawing as much interest as Kevin's, even though they graduated from the same program with the exact same GPA. Unfortunately for Jamal, studies show that resumes with white-sounding names get twice as many callbacks as identical resumes with black-sounding names. Implicit bias is one of the reasons why the black unemployment rate is twice the rate of white unemployment, even among college graduates today. You can see evidence of systemic racism in every area of life. The disparities in family wealth, incarceration rates, political representation, and education are all examples of systemic racism. Unfortunately, the biggest challenge with systemic racism is that there's no single person or entity responsible for it, which makes it very hard to solve. So what can you do? The first thing you can do is work towards becoming more aware of your own implicit biases. What are some prejudices that you might hold that you're not aware of? Second, let's acknowledge that the consequences of slavery and Jim Crow laws are still affecting access to opportunity today. As a result, we should support systemic changes that create more equal opportunities for everyone. Increasing public school funding and making it independent from property taxes would be a great start, so that poor and wealthy districts can receive equal access to resources. Systemic problems require systemic solutions. Luckily, we're all part of the system, which means that we all have a role to play in making it better. Peace.
So that gives you a little bit of some of the terminology that we're dealing with in this conversation. This is heavily focused on white versus African American, but you could use a similar storyline for Hispanic, and even in a large part men versus women, right? Women have been dealing with implicit bias for years as well. So that's that. Angel Williams said at one point, without inner change, there can be no outer change. And without collective change, no change matters. And for me personally, and I think everybody has to go through a process of their own, but for me personally, this problem was a problem that I intellectually knew about, but it was not one that was affecting me to a point where I felt like I needed to do something about it. And I went through an inner change that encouraged me to drive outer change in the world and take it outside of myself. There's a really famous author now, Ibram Kendi, who's set up a social justice department at Boston University. And one of the things he says is most of us are fighting to be exempt as part of the problem. And I think that was me, I knew that I knew that things were going on, but I was okay with myself because I was able to say, I'm not a racist. But Ibram Kendi's position is, it's not good enough to be not racist. If we're going to make any progress in this area as a country, you need to be anti-racist. We need a lot of people to be anti-racist and really fight this systemic problem that we have. So I went through my process, right? I was aware that there have been some police shootings. I was aware of George Floyd, and that sort of got me started and literally thinking about things differently. I went to a rally in Needham where it's because of COVID, it wasn't really a rally. It was everybody line up along the main road in Needham and hold up your sign. So I held up my sign, I went home, I was like, great, I did my thing. And then I'm a New England Patriots fan, so I record this show, Patriots All Access. And they came on with an episode that was all about social justice. And it was Steve Burton, the guy in the middle, talking to a mixture of coaches and players about this subject. And I want to play you two little snippets from it. It was really something else for me. So the first one is Jakob Johnson, who is the guy on the right here.
All the hate in the world, and
yeah, well, we got a long way to go. You definitely have a long way to go. Jakob, you grew up in Europe, United States. What's the biggest change that you've seen since coming over here?
I mean, for me, coming to America was really the first time I experienced getting treated differently because of my skin color. I was always aware that I was a little different in Germany around the other kids, but the fact that I could be discriminated or treated badly because of the color of my skin, that didn't happen to me until I came over here.
Brandon Copeland, I want to come to you next, my friend.
So how crazy is that, right? I mean, this is the United States of America. And the guy comes from Germany and says that this is the first time that he's felt like he's been treated differently because of the color of his skin. And he's in Boston. We're a liberal state, right? We're generally a liberal state. Well, should that be a situation that he encounters? I don't know. Like, I don't think so, right? And this one is one of the coaches.
Just like the level of consciousness that you have to have, you know, when you leave the house every day, is pretty much an everyday struggle. I live in a townhome community where my trash bin is at the end of the complex, and you know, it's getting kind of late right now. So, you know, instead of me saying, hey, well, I can take my trash out at 10 o'clock at night, well, you know, there might be a problem with that. You know, if it's cold outside and I have a hoodie on and I'm coming back and somebody looks out the window and they see, you know, a tall, imposing black man that they feel is threatening, you know, that can turn into a situation where the police are called. And, you know, I mean, we've seen this happen before in different situations. So, you know, just as a black man, the level of consciousness you have to have just on a day in and day out basis, having those conversations in terms of dealing with authority and dealing with police officers, you know, just everyday conversation, you know, it's something that we have to deal with.
You know how we're going to close this out, because for this group.
So that's crazy, right? I mean, here's a guy who is an affluent member of our community, living in a suburb somewhere around Foxborough in a condo community, and he doesn't feel like he can take his trash out to the dumpster at night. Like, it's just not something that we think about, right? It's just not a factor for us. Maybe there's a little bit in the men-women thing, right? It's certainly men don't think about, white men don't think about it. Maybe some women do, but it was a really enlightening show for me. And I would highly recommend it if anybody is interested in this subject matter. It's a really wonderful, I mean, it gets you in to meet some of these Patriots players at a little bit deeper level. And it's also really interesting. So then I went to, there was a bunch of Needham High School students were having a rally on the football field. And I had some time, so I went by and caught most of it. And it was a bunch of minority students talking about their experience growing up in Needham. And now we're like getting really close to home, right? This is my community. And there was this one guy who talked about when he was 11, there was an early release day. So a bunch of the kids from the middle school, as they always do, you know, invade the center of town, right? And he goes to Walgreens to get a couple somethings to eat. He's got $7 in his pocket. So he gets something to eat, he goes and he pays for it, and he's on his way out the door, and this guy grabs him and he says, "You're pretty far from home, aren't you, kid?" Now, the kid is 11. What does he know, you know? He's thinking about it. He said, "Yeah, I don't know, I live like 2 miles that way, so yeah, I guess I'm kind of far from home." And next thing you know, the guy's got him turned upside down. His backpack contents are all over the floor, and the guy's looking for something he might have stolen out of Walgreens. I mean, that's just not right. And that would not happen to a kid who was 11 who happened to be white. It just wouldn't happen. So that and a bunch of other stories were like really eye-opening for me. And then we had our town meeting, and our town meeting, the George Floyd thing was still pretty active. And there was a somebody wanted to have a discussion about it at a town meeting, and they found a way to have a discussion. There was a line item on the budget that dealt with adding a couple police officers, and that sparked a conversation about George Floyd. And it went on for quite a while, and the way that the select board members got us to move past it was by agreeing to have a listening session. So this group here, like the guy in the top left is select board, town manager, middle is select board, on the right is select. This is all our select board, right? And they've invited people to come and address the concept or the problem of racism in Needham. And so I watched this, and there's one guy in particular, this guy in the lower right, that I want to play for you.
Hi, can you see me?
Yes, I can see you.
How you doing? My name is Olusoyin Fayemi. I've lived in Needham for the last 13 years. I grew up in a suburb of New York. I went to Yale University for my undergraduate degree and to Harvard Med School for my medical degree. So I'm no stranger to be surrounded by faces that look very different from my own. I can tell you that several times a year in this town, I'll have an interaction that is extremely unpleasant. And I would say every couple of years, I'll have an interaction that makes me want to move out of Needham. Some of the reactions have been as bad as being followed home because a person can't believe that I live in Needham. Once having the police called on me because someone didn't believe the house that I had keys to was my own house, despite my neighbor even telling this person that this was my house. I turned 50 this year. I'm not sure there's much the town can do to improve my personal experience, but I can speak to what it's done to my children. We have two children. Our son went to Needham from 1st grade to 12th grade, and I can tell you that he was never recommended for any accelerated courses or advanced courses. If it wasn't for our own advocacy, his education would have stalled. By senior year, he was taking all APs or accelerated courses and getting A's in most of them. Our daughter, who made it through 7th grade, we pulled out of school. She was part of the group from the aforementioned by, I think it was Jennifer, that was segregated. But it wasn't just that, it was that she had routine interactions with people telling her that she wasn't good enough, that she was biracial, that she didn't belong. People using names like KKK in their group names and thinking that was okay. So we pulled her out of school. She's in private school. My recommendation to everyone is that we need to learn about the past, especially our children. There's no Black History Month, and we use the excuse that Black history is taught throughout the curriculum. And I can tell you that my children know nothing about slavery, the Civil War, Reconstruction, civil rights, redlining, and the list goes on. And as long as we continue to ignore the past, we're going to do exactly what we're doing. And that's really all I have to say. Thank you for listening. I don't like to preach, but we just need to learn. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Fayemi.
So here's a guy who fits right in. Needham considers itself to be an affluent community, basically. And here's a guy who is a Yale/Harvard doctor. He should be a perfect fit for the town of Needham, and yet he feels like he doesn't belong, and his family is being treated differently than others. So, all this stuff brought everything really close to home for me. And I guess I have to wonder and challenge people, you may think that maybe there's more going on in your own community than you know. And it's a really, for me, it was a very eye-opening period of time as I was going through these different listening sessions and learning about things. COVID in particular has been very challenging for the minority community. You may have seen the K-shaped recovery, where white collar business people are doing just fine, but a lot of the folks that are in the service community and hospitality are minorities, and those folks are really having a hard time because of what's going on with COVID. And they're on the front lines a lot, and so the number of deaths has been disproportionately put into that bucket. some businesses are starting to do something with this now. I think this year in particular, there's more and more going on in this area. The Boston Celtics just recently announced that they were going to spend $25 million over 10 years on racial justice. And they have very well-defined areas that they're going to focus on: education, economic empowerment, healthcare, breaking down barriers, voting. So that they're going to work on all these areas. My company, Keller Williams, has a initiative that's going on right now that is also very well thought out, and there's a lot going on there. And I was at a virtual seminar recently where there were several sessions that were focused on this area. You know, bend towards justice, build a thriving business through equity and inclusion, and be a real estate agent of change. So there's a lot of really interesting things going on there. Salesforce.com, if you look at the Rotary District 7910 Social Equity Task Force webpage, there's a link to the 10 best corporate DEI videos. And the one that spoke to me the most as a Rotarian was Salesforce.com, and I'll play that for you right now.
At a very young age, we learn to make a distinction between you
and me.
Simple, right? But what if somehow?
What if somehow?
I could see the world from your perspective.
And you could see it from mine. Think for a second. I know all your hopes and dreams.
E tudo que te incomoda.
और आपको भी वो पता चले मेरे बारे में.
You know what it's like to have a daughter who struggles with, is she black enough? Is she white enough?
You would know what it's like to not have enough confidence to express your ideas.
You'd know what it would be like for people to take your culture and turn it into a theme party.
You would know that every time that you say you have a husband, people pause.
To be gender non-conforming.
To be comfortable being uncomfortable a lot of times.
You know what it's like to lose your little brother to HIV.
You'd know that there is struggle and pain, but also a lot of hope.
And suddenly
we would see
that although our lives are very different,
they are also very much the same.
And that bigger than you and me
is us.
Novel.
And as us, we know this.
You don't have to look like us.
Worship like us.
Live like us.
Or love like us.
To stand with us.
Of course, you'll always be you.
And I'll always be me.
But there's nothing stopping us.
There's nothing stopping us.
There's nothing stopping us.
There's nothing stopping us from becoming us.
Ni to be.
Kami.
Nosotros.
Woman.
Nós.
We're stronger as us.
We're stronger as allies.
Yeah, to me, you could take that video and just throw a Rotary logo right on it, right? I mean, we are all about peace through understanding. We're all about we're internationally, we're very incredibly diverse organization, right? So there's a district down in Florida that put their own video together, which I thought was really good. And I'll play that for you.
Something to everyone in a spirit of humility, a spirit of meekness, and a spirit of love. There's chaos and calamity in the world. And there's so much hurt and distrust. And I have a lot of friends of many different shades and colors that I've walked our life with. Great men and women in the community. And to all of us, I do not like that the world is controlling the narrative. It should be us controlling the narrative. Whether it's bad police or bad politicians, we have the spirit of redemption when we speak. When we say something, we want to bring it together not separated. When police are killed, we need to say something. When black boys are killed, we need to say something. And when we don't say something, we're saying something.
So I thought that was really great, the way they put it together. And, you know, it sort of tells the story of Rotary and like, what is our role in all this, right? Like what role should it be? Certainly we've been an organization that tries to stay away from politics. Is this a political question or is this a ethical question? You know, we are a very diverse organization, right? We're in Uganda and Taiwan, and we have International Assembly convention every year with all sorts of countries, like hundreds of countries represented. So internationally, we're very diverse. From an equity perspective, we do a lot for equity. Like we're helping build wells for people that don't have them so that they can get a leg up to where we are, where we take water for granted. We built a solar array on schools in India so they could have electricity that would free up their operational funds to pay for books and pencils like we have. I mean, we're all about doing projects to give people a leg up, right? That's kind of who we are. And inclusion, you know, we're not a fixed and staid organization. We have a rotating Rotary International president from a different country every year. We deal with different ages of people. We deal with different races. Our individual clubs, maybe we could do better at our individual club level in terms of inclusivity and diversity. But in general, I think we're in a really good place. And Rotary International is recognizing that this is something that we need to focus on. You know, they put out a statement that says, at Rotary, we have no tolerance for racism, promoting respect, celebrating diversity, demanding ethical leadership, and working tirelessly to advance peace are tenets of our work. We have more work to do to create more just, open, and welcoming communities for all people. We know there are no easy fixes and that challenging conversations and work lie before all of us. But Rotary's strength has long been our ability to and commitment to bringing people together. We will tap into that strength now that as we stand with those who are working for peace and justice. Rotary will do our part to listen, learn, and take action to ensure that we continue to contribute to making positive change. So with that, there's a Rotary International DEI group right now that's just basically getting started. And there's also a Rotary Action Group on this front. Let's see if somebody's chatting. Yes, we can get there, yep. There was a TV show called 30 Days, where in this show, this guy who is a Border Patrol deputy lived for 30 days with an illegal immigrant family. You can imagine two people on two different sides of the racism perspective, like these two individuals, right? They lived together for 30 days, and as a result, they came to understand each other. And I think Rotary, my belief is that Rotary has the potential to really make people talk to each other, get people to talk to each other and bring some understanding to the world. Paul Harris said, "This is a changing world and we must be prepared to change with it. The story of Rotary will have to be written again and again." Let's see. So the Social Equity Task Force, 2 more slides here. We have 9 members. We're looking for additional members. We've got a Facebook page and a Google Calendar. And we have a web page you can check out on the district website. We have priorities around developing DEI materials for the individual clubs to use, providing diversity, equity, and inclusion training, fostering club membership diversity, and developing sample DEI project how-to documents and projects. I have some information on Bedford, which I'll skip over because we're running late, I think, here. But I did some looking and found some organizations that are doing DEI work in your community.
Yeah.
What's that?
It's okay.
Yeah, and there's a parents organization that's working on diversity in schools. There are some businesses. Progress Software is hiring a chief inclusion and diversity officer, and Novanta is hiring a vice president of leadership development and diversity, equity, and inclusion. So these are organizations within your community where you could reach out and say, hey, we love what you're doing. How can we help? And how can we be involved? And maybe can you help us in some of the things that we're doing in this space, you know? So what's next? As a task force, we're working to continue to expand and diversify. We're performing DEI training for as many clubs as we can. We have created a DEI citation, so your club can apply to become a DEI club at the district assembly. There's a rubric that you can fill out and apply for that. And we're following along with what's going on globally. And I've actually been in communication with the woman, Valerie Wafer, who is running the global group. And as we uncover interesting things on our side, I've been sending her away to try and get them into what they're doing. And we're creating an online resource library with books and videos and events. And we may be looking to hire an intern to a college intern to help us with that. So that's one of the things we're working on. In your community, there's a lot of things that you guys could do. You could reach out to some of these diversity organizations and ask them to be a speaker. Look for ways to partner with them. Reach out to businesses that are doing DEI work. Reach out to minority-owned businesses about membership. Identify someone in your club to be a DEI leader, which probably would be Ralph. There's some LinkedIn learning resources that you could use for a meeting if you don't have a speaker. And you could host a multicultural event within your schools. You could sponsor K-12 students in need. You can sponsor mentors for them. Have a book club, Black History Month. We're trying to come up with all sorts of ideas for people for things that they can do. So that's the end of the PowerPoint presentation. I'd be happy to take questions and have a discussion if you